but criticising them fairly, pointing out where mistakes have been made, but not overstepping the mark. There will be a lot of times where the proceedings are closed. Now, the fact that proceedings are closed does not breach the right to a fair trial, as long as only specific aspects of the trial are closed. A protected witness giving evidence can be done in a closed hearing. Journalists have to respect the fact that they are not entitled to report details of those witnesses for either the prosecution or the defence. And there will be protected witnesses on both sides. It's not just the prosecution. Journalists have to remember that. Now, the concept of freedom of expression is a complex subject in itself, and I won't go over that now because it's set out in the last few pages of my paper, and I'm happy to answer any questions on that you may have. The only point that I would like to finish with is the role of advocates. Now, this is in the second from last page. And I'd just like to say this. Advocates must fight fearlessly for their clients. It is not their role to agree or to accept their clients' politics or ideologies. It is their role and duty to strongly argue their client's case, publicly. An author of international law recently stated, in defence of the defence, merely because they represent the best legal interests of their clients, lawyers do not thereby subscribe to their views or ideologies. They owe the persons they represent the very best of their professional abilities, not a willingness to share views which they may find repulsive. You will be asked this question, why you are representing war criminals. Well, that is your answer. You do not run a political defence, you run a legal defence, as you would in any case. And the concluding words that I have in my paper, the very famous words of Voltaire, I do not agree with what you say, but I will fight to the death your right to say it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Toby Cadman, for delivering his speech on such an important issue. Now is the time for question and answer. If you have any question, you may place before Toby Cadman, and he will answer. I already have a written question. One Mr. Chokdar MS Sattar, advocate. He has asked a question, written question.
Okay, it's a difficult question to answer. Perhaps if I can ask, is it Mr. Chokdar Sattar? When the question is referring to the jurisdiction of the International Court, are we talking about the International Criminal Court, or are we talking about the International Crimes Tribunal? The ICC. Well, the ICC is set up under a system of complementarity to deal with cases in which a country has not addressed itself. It is not set up to deal with, and after Bangladesh has ratified the statute of the ICC, it is not set up to deal with the 1971 War of Independence. It is set up to deal with only those countries that have ratified the statute and for crimes that have occurred following ratification, not prior. Its reach is only as far as the countries that have ratified the statute. For example, if this country accepted the jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court, the International Criminal Court could, in theory, try cases from Bangladesh. But the question is, could it also summon defendants outside of the jurisdiction of Bangladesh in proceedings before the International Criminal Court? Well, that's a matter that the International Criminal Court would have to consider whether its jurisdiction permits such a matter. It's not where the defendant is found, it's where the crimes have occurred. And if the crimes have occurred within the jurisdiction of Bangladesh, then any persons can be brought before the tribunal for those crimes committed. But it's a question that hasn't been effectively answered yet, but is likely to be answered in the very near future. Sure.
Lying in Bangladesh, I would be much glad if you please convey.
Okay.
Right through towards this point must apply. I will
Okay. The 2 points that you're effectively raising, first of all, insofar as the media is concerned, and I'll draw the comparison with Bosnia. Bosnia had the same problems in having journalists who had for many, many years worked under a communist regime that did not necessarily have a free, independent press, had suddenly come and were required to report on very difficult cases, very political cases. And so we established what was known as the Balkan Investigative Reporting Network. This was an NGO which was established of journalists who were trained in court reporting, particularly war crimes. They were trained by the International Criminal Tribunal for the former Yugoslavia. They were trained by Sense news agency, which was a Croatian news agency based in The Hague, and they received proper training. They now report throughout the Balkans on war crimes issues. I would recommend to the news agencies of this country who would like to report and would like to learn how to properly report, because it requires an understanding of the law in order to report these cases properly. I would recommend, and I'm quite happy to put any journalist or any news agency in contact with those agencies in Bosnia and in The Hague that are experienced in this area. Your second question, more geared towards professionals, lawyers, who do not have those skills but would like to acquire those skills. There are many agencies that are equipped to train in this area. My chambers, for example, trains barristers at the International Criminal Court on this area. There is my colleague Stephen Kay QC has a body based in The Hague called the International Criminal Law Bureau that also trains lawyers to appear at the International Criminal Court and the new Lebanon Tribunal in The Hague. So there are agencies out there are people out there who will provide training. The International Bar Association, for example, the War Crimes Committee, of which I am a member, should provide training to lawyers, judges, prosecutors, to the whole spectrum. It's very important that that training is done now. We know that there is a desire to move these trials forward, to run them quickly, and that training is essential. And I can tell you that it is a matter that I will be raising with Ambassador Rapp, that the training is a very important consideration. It took us a great deal of time to train judges and prosecutors in Bosnia. They are now some of the best professionals in this area.
One more question.
With the International Crimes Tribunal is that the normal rules that apply in ordinary criminal cases do not apply to these cases. That is a concern. The Evidence Act, the Criminal Procedure Act, does not apply to these trials, but it applies in normal criminal trials. That is a concern. So in answer to your first question, I haven't looked at tribunals across the country. I've only looked at the International Crimes Tribunal, the Act and the rules. But what I've said today is not addressed at any particular tribunal. These are general principles. The point of today's presentation was to set out what are the minimum requirements under international law, what might be meant by international standards. And that's why when I refer to tribunals, I'm not talking about tribunals in Bangladesh, I'm talking about tribunals generally. So that would be the first point that I'd make. I'm sorry, you'll have to forgive me. Perhaps you could just summarise your second question again. Partisan. I believe the reference to partisan that I've made was David Bergman's words rather than my words. I had used that as an opening statement because he's a journalist and the main topic of today was the role of journalists and the role they play. My intention was not to suggest in this paper that there is anything partisan because I'm talking about general principles, not specifics today. If I have suggested that it is partisan, I would only say this, that the Act and the rules as they currently stand, in my view, as an international lawyer, are one-sided. That is not a suggestion that the government is acting partisan, and I have stated since my first visit to this country that I fully support what the government is trying to do in terms of bringing these cases, these matters to trial, because the government has an international obligation to do so. I only ask that it be done fairly in accordance with some of the standards that I've set out today.